Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much again for joining us today. Today's webinar is part of the Smart Nation Together series brought to you by the Smart Nation and Digital Government Office. I'm Cheryl and I'll be your host for this session. So the webinar today is on securing your IoT devices at home. So with most people having smart homes in recent years, how do we prevent hackers from stealing your information and spying on you? We're very glad to have with us today Stephen, a systems engineer at CSA. Stephen analyzes and evaluates cyber risk and the design of systems in the internet domain. So if you have questions for him during the session, do leave them at the Q&A box below and he will get to them at the end of the session. So without further ado, let me hand over the time to Stephen. Stephen, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Stephen, a systems engineer at the Cybersecurity Agency of Singapore, in short, CSA. My role at CSA involves analyzing and evaluating cyber risks and design of systems in the internet domain. It also involves the conceptualization and development of technical initiatives in ensuring a safer internet for Singapore. And today, I'll be sharing with you on how you can secure your IoT devices at home. Before I dive into the topic, here's a quick background of what does CSA do. CSA was established in 2015 to keep Singapore cyberspace safe and secure. We oversee national cybersecurity and work with relevant agencies to protect Singapore's critical information infrastructure, such as systems that deliver essential services like transport, banking, and info communications. We also engage with stakeholders on areas such as raising cybersecurity awareness, building a vibrant ecosystems, and pursuing international partnerships. So, what is cybersecurity and why is it important? Cybersecurity is the practice of protecting your internet-connected devices and systems from cyber incidents. It's important as cyber threats out there are very real and closer to us than most of us would think. And closer to our heart then, as you would have read in the news, that there have been OCBC phishing scams and QR code phishing scams involving SingPass, which is essentially our online identity. As Minister for Comms and Information, Mrs. Josephine Teo has highlighted in her Facebook post, every Singaporean has a part to play in cyber defense. And with the ongoing conflict in Russia and Ukraine, there's a rising number of reports globally involving scammers taking advantages of the crisis to trick people with phishing emails. So it's important that we take the necessary steps to protect ourselves in the cyberspace. Here is an overview of today's session, which we will focus on IoT devices. The risk of using IoT devices with poor security features, ways to protect your IoT devices, the introduction to the Cybersecurity Labeling Scheme, CLS for short, and some useful resources before a Q&A session. So what are IoTs? The IoT represents Internet of Things that refers to the network of items and devices from home appliances to vehicles, embedded with software and sensors that enable them to connect, collect, and exchange data. IoT combines information technology, telecommunications, big data, and analytics to enable the creation of business value for sectors from public health and transportation to logistics and navigation. IoT is not just about being connected to multiple devices. It helps deliver enhanced products for consumer, improve work processes and public services, and bring about better living experience for everyone. Essentially, it's increasingly become a part of how we live, we work, and we play daily. So now, here are some examples of IoT devices, such as the smart refrigerator, smart door locks, smart TVs, smart lights, robotic vacuum, and IP camera. I'm sure all of us here would have at least one of these IoT devices at home. The number of IoT devices in operation continues to grow exponentially. At the TechX Summit organized by the Home Team Science and Technology Agency, HTX, held 2 weeks ago on 5th of April, Senior Minister Teo Chee Hean mentioned that the number of IoT devices is projected to reach 64 billion globally in 2025, which works out to about 8 IoT devices on average for every person on this planet. While IoT devices continue to grow at breakneck speed, it also becomes equally as important to secure your IoT devices. So why? Perhaps let's find out in the next slide. Recall chancing upon news like this. I'm sure everybody would have a little glimpse or some memories of what actually happened in 2020. In 2020, security cameras in Singapore homes were hijacked, were hacked. Footages were all leaked on pornographic sites, And of course, in 2020, CSA, we have launched our cyber landscape report. We noted that there were many botnets with Singapore IP addresses, which had tripled from 2,300 daily in 2019 to approximately 7,000 in 2020. A botnet drone is essentially a computer malware that infects and compromises target computers and connect the target computers into a botnet network, which allows hackers to launch attacks on homes and office devices that are hooked up to the internet. It is therefore important to secure our IoT devices to safeguard our privacy and data. And I'm sure every one of us here would not want to be a part of this botnet where we get exploited to do things that is not intended. Amidst the growth in number of IoT products in the market, and in view of the short time to market, many consumer IoTs have been designed to optimize functionality and cost over security. As a result, many devices are being sold with poor cybersecurity provisions, with little to no security features built in. Following the hack footages from the IP home cams, authorities have acknowledged that weak security provisions of many IoT devices were a concern, and the members of public were advised to practice good hygiene. IoT devices with little or no security features poses cybersecurity risks. Consumers' privacy and data can be compromised. Hackers generally look out for the easiest systems to attack, and IoT devices with minimal or zero security is essentially like opening your front door to hackers. I'm sure no one actually wants that to happen. So, what are some of the risks of using devices with poor security features? Devices with universal default passwords can easily be breached by hackers. And using universal default password is as good as opening the front doors for hackers, as they can just simply try it and they will be able to access your system. And that is normally taken in seconds. Devices with poor security features can easily be hacked by hackers and subject the user to information theft. For example, if you have a IP camera at home and is still using very poor security features, someone who actually comes to your neighborhood happens to know that you are using that particular device with a poor security feature, he or she can easily access your camera and actually observe what is going on in your house for other reasons. Devices with poor security features or no security updates can also be a conduit for attackers to gain access to your network, with them gradually taking control of your other devices. I'm sure none of us actually wants that to happen as well. With all of that I've covered so far, don't you want to find out more on how to secure your IoT devices? How about this? Let's find out 5 important tips to secure your IoT devices. Firstly, is to change your default router settings. By doing that, it means to secure your router by firstly changing the default password provided by the manufacturer. Your Wi-Fi networks are the first defense against hackers, as many of the IoT devices are typically connected to the internet. To change your router default password, simply enter your router IP address into your web browser that is already connected to your Wi-Fi. Log in with the default username and password that comes with the system itself, with the router itself. Go to settings, select change router password or a similar option that can allow you to actually change the router password. Enter the new password, after which save the new settings. This might be a generic way to change the default password for most routers. However, do check with your manufacturer on how to change the default password of your router if it doesn't actually work in this flow. Next, when you're creating the new password, is essentially that you create a strong password. I mean, what's the purpose of changing a password if it's not strong enough, right? That will still be subjected to hackers to actually just know it fast or to crack it fast. So using a common and simple password for IoT device is as good as opening the front door for hackers. Hence, to use strong password, as they are the best defense against hackers. What I would suggest is that you can use a new and unique password for every IoT devices, so that hackers who manage to guess the password to one of your devices will not be able to compromise every IoT device that you own using the same password. So by saying a strong password, what would be a strong password? A strong password typically is one that has at least 12 characters with uppercase and lowercase, numbers and symbols. For it to be memorable, they can use words that relate to a memory to form a phrase, like the example that you actually seen on the screen now. I had kaya toast at 8 a.m. So that will actually be a meaningful one that you will be able to still remember it. And of course, it will be tough. It will be tough to crack as well because it contains all the things that I've just spoken earlier. On the other hand, it's also crucial to enable 2FA where applicable. Now, when you're creating password, there are 3 things that we should all avoid. Please take note of this. First, we should not use our personal information as a password. This will include our name, our NIRC number, our birth dates, etc. Secondly, we should also avoid common phrases and obvious patterns like capitalizing the first letter or adding consecutive numbers like 1, 2, 3 to the end of an easily guessable password. So for example, if you're actually you have a Wi-Fi at home and decided to call it Lim Family, the next thing you do is that you actually have the password as Lim Family 1, 2, 3. That's pretty obvious. Anyone could have guessed that. And lastly, like I mentioned earlier, we should always refrain from using the password for all accounts and to avoid having your devices compromised should one of them are affected. Why so? Perhaps let me just do some sharing on this. I believe that sometimes while we have accounts that are online for, be it for transactions, be it for whatever company or even internet banking, right? Some of these passwords, there may be leaks, or if let's say companies get compromised, your password essentially gets leaked out to the black market in the internet. So if a hacker were to actually buy those lists from those black sources, they can potentially find out your account names, your typical passwords, and they can actually just look for that in every single platform like your Gmail, your Hotmail, right? And try with the account and the password, and hopefully that one of them will work. Hence, it's important that you should always have different passwords for different accounts and different logins as well. So, tip 3 is to update your software promptly. IoT devices often have no other layer of protection, and updating your IoT devices promptly is crucial for its security to help patch vulnerabilities or flaws in your system. This also resonates with what I have shared earlier on. Typically, IoT devices comes to the market fast and is ready for functionality and never for security. Hence, it's important to turn on the option to automatically check for updates on your IoT devices, as most IoT manufacturers actually send regular updates. However, if they don't really do that, you can always visit their website to check for new updates and security patches. Remember, updating your software promptly keeps you protected with the latest security patches, and it reduces the chance of cyber attacks. Tip number 4, to disconnect IoT devices from home networks and internet when smart functions are not required. It's important to be aware of any functionality that you need from your IoT devices. Most of the IoT devices today, like the refrigerator and television, can connect to the internet, but it doesn't mean that you need to connect them to the internet. So for example, I think a lot of us out there, when we are looking at products that we want to buy, like refrigerators, nowadays they are coming out with a lot of these smart refrigerators that will be saying, wow, it's a smart refrigerator. It must be something savvy, it must be something cool. I should buy that. But next thing you buy it, and typically on a day-to-day basis, you don't actually use the smart functions of the refrigerator. Hence, you should actually disable it. For in fear that if a hacker or malicious adversary is actually near you, he may actually exploit your refrigerator for some other malicious purposes. So take note and look very closely at the features of your devices and learn exactly which device needs the internet connectivity to function and which device doesn't need it. You may also wish to disconnect your IoT devices from home networks and the internet when you don't intend to use the smart functions of the IoT devices. In that way, you safeguard your devices, and of course, you give hacker less space to infiltrate into your systems. Because do remember that when you disconnect something from the internet, they are essentially you actually are not available to be checked out by the adversaries or hacker. And tip number 5, which is my last tip over here, is to pick devices that are rated under the Cybersecurity Labeling Scheme, in short, CLS. To choose CLS labeled devices, as the devices would have already met baseline security requirements. And these devices also help consumers to identify devices that have better cybersecurity provisions and to make with informed decisions on which are the ones that I really want to provide me with necessary security when I actually use them at home. You might be wondering, what is Cybersecurity Labeling Scheme and how it helps to secure IoT devices? Don't worry, I will actually talk more about CLS in the next few slides. The Cybersecurity Agency of Singapore launched the CLS for consumer smart devices as part of efforts to improve IoT security. We are trying to raise overall cyber hygiene levels and better secure Singapore cyberspace. The CLS also aims to help manufacturers stand out from their competitors and be incentivized to develop more secure products. Under the scheme, smart devices will be rated according to the levels of cybersecurity provisions. This will enable consumers like yourselves and even myself to identify products with better cybersecurity provisions and make informed decisions on which are the ones that are the most appropriate for me to buy to ensure my security and to ensure that my data and privacy do not get compromised. The CLS was first introduced to cover Wi-Fi routers and smart home hubs. These products were prioritized because of their wider usage. I believe everyone here has a Wi-Fi router at home, as well as the impact that a compromise of the products could have on users. It has since been extended to include all categories of consumer IoT devices, such as your IP cameras, smart door locks, smart lights, and even your smart printers at home. There are approximately 100 products now. And to find out more about the products registered under the Cybersecurity Labeling Scheme, or if you need more details on the CLS, simply scan the QR code on the bottom right-hand side, or to visit the links as follows. I'll just give you 5 seconds should any one of you need to have capture a screenshot of this. Yep, right, we'll just move on. Yeah. So in terms of the Cybersecurity Label Scheme, is actually 4 progressive rating levels that allow consumers to discern the level of security offered by the products and with its imbued security consciousness when making purchases. Of course, to determine if a product is certified by under the Cybersecurity Labeling Scheme, consumers can look out for these labels. The label will always display a product cybersecurity level from level 1 to level 4 and its registration ID in the format. Take note that it's unique, and it consists of the CSA followed by a date of label expiration and a typical product ID that's number that's assigned by CSA. For level 1, the devices will have meet baseline security requirements, such as not having universal default passwords, having software updates, and having a vulnerable disclosure policy, which essentially is telling everyone that, should there be any issues, you can always contact the merchant and they will actually work on it. For level 2, it will have to meet level 1 requirements first, and the device has been designed to use some principles of security by design. By having said that, security by design essentially means that over the course of them developing and manufacturing the system, right, yes, undergone through a series of security in place, ensuring that the necessary security provisions are all in place as well. For level 3, it will have meet both level 1 and level 2 requirements, and the device software has been assessed by third-party labs to be absent from known common software vulnerabilities. The lab test also ensures that the IoT device firmware and mobile applications are free from malware. And for level 4, it will actually consist and encompass all the requirements from level 1, 2, and 3. And on top of that, the device has been penetration tested by third-party labs to be resistant against common cyber attacks. Also, starting from 2 May 2022 this year, it will become mandatory for all consumer Wi-Fis to come with CLS level 1, and consumers may start to keep a lookout for all these Wi-Fi routers. So when you make your trip down to Harvey Norman, Challenger, and other IT companies, right, you will actually see all these Wi-Fi routers that actually comes along with it. Yeah, so do get one that is CLS enabled. Yep. So as I mentioned earlier on, there's about 100 products now that have already been labeled by the CLS. Here's just a screenshot, a quick glance of all the things that have been labeled. And I'm sure everybody here actually has a Trace Together token, right? Yeah, so if you actually turn around your Trace Together token now, you actually realize that there's actually this particular cute logo there. There's actually the CLS, and it's of course it's a 4-star label. Right, so I've come to more or less my sharing. I think it's time to test your understanding on what we have discussed with a quick quiz. I hope you guys are ready. Right, here's the first question. It is advisable to set the same password for all your IoT devices. It's a yes and no question. I hope all of you will have answered the correct answer. Answers are coming quickly. Yep. Right. Thanks for your answers. Yeah, I can see that many of you have almost all of you have actually answered the correct answer here. And the answer is no. Yep. You should always use a new and unique password for every IoT devices so that hackers who manages to guess the password to one of your devices will not be able to gain access to every IoT devices of yours that uses the same password. Remember that you do not want to have all your systems get compromised just because one of your password actually gets leaked out. So remember, always use a new and unique password for every IoT devices that you own so that you really do not want to get compromised just of everything just because you lose one password. Now, the second question would be, one of the ways to secure your IoT devices is to choose devices that are CLS certified because it comes with the default router password. It helps you disable two-factor authentication. It comes with baseline security requirements, or it disables software updates. I can see that a lot of answers are coming in, and yes, most of you are right as well. Just wait for a few seconds while answers are continuing to come in. All right, thanks for your answers. Yes, like most of you have answered correctly. The purpose for the CLS is actually a scheme to ensure that all the devices comes with baseline security requirements. Remember, the CLS is here to actually guide you on what devices are good, those that actually come with better cybersecurity provisions, and to provide you some ease of heart that at least the device you use satisfies all the necessary baseline security requirements. And that's all for the quiz. We have compiled some useful resources that you can access for more cyber tips, as well as scam prevention advice. I've reached the end of my presentation, and thank you. I shall just